Hussein Hallak, welcome to the Personal Success Podcast. Thanks for sharing time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump right in. In your book, The Dark Art of Life Mastery, you wrote you were caught in this performance trap, right? Checking off boxes of external success, but feeling hollow still. Was there a particular moment or realization when this sort of performance mask finally cracked?
I think, yeah, that's a great question. I think when in 2008 I was building this successful advertising agency after a massive failure of my tech company. I lost like $1 million in that, and I've spent around 2006. I built my largest, let's say, tech company at the time. It was the largest marketplace for Middle Eastern art in the world. I put like 1,200 artists online, and it was a massive media success. I was on the cover of Forbes. I was everywhere, hailed as the person who's going to change the face of the art. So after that failure and losing $1 million, and that part of the world is like losing $50 million here.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
was a massive, massive hit. I built myself up within like 2, 3 years to recover, pay everyone back, because in that part of the world you can't claim bankruptcy. I don't know how it is right now in Dubai. At the time, like there's no way out. I have to pay people back. So that's what I did, and I was quite successful. And then the financial crisis, if you remember, started to happen. So
yeah.
my partner was heavily invested in property, and he came to me and said, "We need to fire everyone to survive, and you build it again, just like you did the first time." I was like, that's inconceivable for me. Number one, because I can't fire everyone. I would rather have them be in there, and I don't see a future for the work that we're doing. I've looked around and said, there is something more. I want something more here. And I was very much in love with writing. I said, what would it take to kind of jump ship and just do writing? And I had no clue what I'm going to do. I just knew that I had $5,000 at the time and a computer. So I left. I took a coaching course, proactive coaching at the time, and I had no idea what's going to happen. But through that coaching course, I got connected to what is it like to kind of love something, and that the possibility, I don't remember exactly how, but the possibility that you can do what you love, that work doesn't have to be separate, or the things that you do in life doesn't have to be separate from the things you love. And that was like a shocking moment for me. And that was the moment where I was like, maybe I should live my life pursuing the things that I love. And that kind of changed everything.
Yeah, wow, that's what a powerful story. I can't help but be curious about, a lot of people in that circumstance, right, who had that situation would not sort of turn to what they loved, right? They would be like, I've got to kind of follow the guidance from the world, right, and go through this process of rebuilding and hit all these check boxes because that's what you're supposed to do. Based on your experience, why do you think that you chose differently?
I think the desire was I have had a successful life so far. I think the failure before that was my first failure, and I failed because I haven't failed before in business, I would say. So I was graduated as an engineer, sought to become a musician, and I led a very impressive several. I was part of several impressive bands back in Syria, where I grew up. I managed to travel to Dubai, work at the Disney of the Middle East. They acquired my company. I built a consulting company after that. And it was, so I had multiple successes, and that was my first failure. And I didn't know why I failed. That was the biggest thing. And I was like, okay, so I've had these successes. I got what I wanted. And I know that feeling of like going after something that you really want and achieving that. Why don't I make that what my life is about? Why do I have to live by what other people choose? I haven't done that before, and it didn't kind of govern why I fail and succeed. I think I don't know if I had like a clear idea of it, but I had a sense that my failure or success is not governed by my choices. My choice, so whatever I choose, I can't govern what's going to happen after. I can only control my choice, and that's why I said, well, what is the thing I can choose? What is the one metric I can use to make this choice? If the success is not guaranteed, if my choices do not guarantee failure or success. I mean, at the time, financial crisis that happened was out of our hands, was out of everybody's hands. And you look at the most successful people. We've had CEOs at the time in Dubai that led $50 million companies, and because they couldn't get paid by their contractors, they had to flee the country. And here it's like so. No matter what people chose, if you look at all their histories, they all faced kind of the same destiny. And I said, well, if that's the case, why don't at least I do what I can control, which is a choice based on the things that matter to me. So that led to a question that was the most important question that I asked, which is, what is the most important thing for me? Because up until then, I had my vision board that has climbing Mount Everest, speaking at TED, what is it, having a Mercedes SLS, like all of the cliche things that I've had, but none of them mattered. And I had to ask myself, what truly matters to me? And that question, at the time, I didn't have an answer, but I said, at least I should make a choice based on that question. At the time, what mattered most to me is to really do things that I love. I couldn't stand a moment. I said, if I'm going to do whatever and I can't control failure or success, I better at least fail while doing the things that I love. It's better than succeeding doing the things that that I hate, and then I'm locked into that. It becomes a prison rather than something I could celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's sort of a strange blessing, right? That you have the successes that you had. It reminds me of there's a sort of a viral clip going around right now with the American actor Will Smith, where he's talking
Mm.
about, he says, you can get to the end of money, you can get to the end of fame, you can get to the end of sex, I think he says. But what's interesting is I think a lot of people might point to that and be like, "Oh, you're so successful, so you can say that." But I think if you take a second, you listen to that, he ends by saying, at the end of the day, what really matters is how deeply you reach into here. And I think that kind of is an allegory for your experience here.
100%. I was lucky because I started. It sounds wrong, but I was lucky because I started poor. Because I experienced the idea that we started poor. We started in Damascus, Syria. I would never, in like a million years, would imagine sitting here in Vancouver, having the place that I have. And let me tell you, it's not because of money. Like throughout my life, I've had more money that I could handle. At the time, it was like a lot of money, and I lost more money than I can even imagine for someone growing out of Syria. Just to give you an idea, as an engineer in Syria, you get paid $100 per month. That's your salary. To buy a book, I had to, or the books that I wanted, like $20. So two books, that would mean you're halfway of your salary just to buy two books.
Yeah.
So the things that I valued, that taught me an important lesson that the things that I value had nothing to do with money, because I reached a point where I was paid at the time like $1,000 or $2,000 a month. You could buy anything in Syria. You could live like a king at that time. I'm talking and early 2000. You live like a king having a couple of $1,000. That's insane money. I got to a point where I got paid for being a writer $4,000 per day for my writing. So I've experienced having money and living in villas and going to the high dining at the highest restaurant in the world. I experienced all of that, and I can tell you I completely agree with Will Smith, because at the end of all of this, what matters most is who you share it with. And I have made the right decision of being with the love of my life. And I experienced that. And it's like, I want that feeling in everything that I do. And it's not too much to ask, because I enjoy writing right now. Even when nobody likes it, even when nobody clicks on it. Don't get me wrong, I'm still human. I'm filled with, vanity, and I want people to like it, and I want
Of
to be
course.
the most famous, the most money. But when it comes down to it, and I'm on my own sitting here, the things that I truly enjoy and I value has nothing to do with that. And I think when we are honest with ourselves and really look inside to find what matters to us, because it's different for everyone. Maybe it's money for you. Great, good for you. But as long as it's what's inside, I think you're on the right track.
Yeah, I'm curious, and maybe you have an answer to this, maybe you don't, but I certainly, uh, y- I've had my own sort of version of that, right? Maybe a smaller scale or whatnot, but I connected with your story, and I connected with sort of Will Smith's story there. And I suppose for someone who's had that experience where you said, I've sort of lived at, if you're talking about money, I've lived in a villa. I've lived with, I've been poor, right? How would you how would you get the power and the actual lesson that sort of you learned in that? How would you get that across to somebody who's never been there?
Hmm. I think what matters most in when somebody's not there, because I mentor a lot of people, is to ask them what do they really want out of life. I think, and it sounds like amorphous, but I really dig deeper onto that, and I say, if you had all the time and money in the world, what would you do? And most people will not say. I mean, after buying all the cars, all the yachts, you have all the time and money in the world. You can buy whatever you want. You have all the time to enjoy them. What do you choose to do? And you will find that people quickly go to the things that matter most to them. It's easier for them because at the time of need, I've been there. Like when you don't have money, you're not sure if your credit card's gonna go, if you're gonna be able to pay for groceries. That's all you have on your mind. It's like, oh my God, how I'm gonna make it till tomorrow. And it is like stressful. There are things in life that you have to do that you don't want to do. There are things that you enjoy doing, and there are things that you don't care about, but they're part of life. You have to pay rent, you have to live, you have to buy groceries and all of that. I think when you start asking yourself that and connect with this, and then ask yourself, well, what is one thing I can do? When I moved to Vancouver in 2014, I came here and I had two successful businesses that I left in Dubai, and my money was running out. I remember going through settlement services, doing my resume, applying like to 200 jobs, and then getting one lousy interview. And like money was running out, and I didn't know what to do. This is a place that I don't know. And my first inclination is like, let me go back to Dubai. At least there, I know how to navigate. I'm kind of failing miserably here. And then I asked myself that question. I said, if I had all the time and money, what would I do? And my answer was resoundingly clear. I will write. I will spend all my time writing and reading. It's what I love to do all the time. My favorite thing in the world. And then I said, okay, so let's say I have zero time and money. I have nothing. What what can I do? And then what could I do is just write. I said, what if I write like for 5 minutes every day? And that's what I started doing. And on my way to every day, I'm looking for a job. I had my phone on me, and I would be on the like the transport, the bus, and I would write for 5-10 minutes along the way, and that's what I would do every day. And then what I started doing is publishing those on my LinkedIn. And suddenly, when I started to connect with people, people would see that I'm writing on stuff, that I'm not just going after them to kind of ask for a job, and ended up connecting with 6,000 people within that summer and meeting 100 people for coffees. And and from that, five of them offered me jobs, and I never asked for a job. I never even told them I'm looking for a job. It's like, I'm new, I'm looking to connect with people, all of that. And that opened up the door for me. And that started also my career in writing, because I started writing more often. And the thing is, I think the lesson was for me is that when we start thinking about something, unless we have it in a certain way, we're not willing to do it. Like if I'm writing, if I think of writing, the first thing I think, oh, I should write a. So I need the time, the energy, I need the tools, and we start to commit ourselves to all of these things, and we forget about the act. If I write for 2 minutes, it's more valuable than thinking about all the things that I need to write a book that will come out maybe 6 months down the line. So if I write an article and put it out, maybe it brings me, maybe people are interested by it. And that's what I did even recently. Just to kind of hamper on this for people who say, well, you're now at a position. Well, recently I wanted to write. I was very impacted by the situation that is happening, and I had something to say about it. And I started writing. And somebody said, well, do you have a Substack link that I can send to people? I was like, no, I don't have, but I'll set it up. I set up a Substack link. And then one person pledged money for it. I was like, people pledged money for this. So I started writing more often, and people pledged more money and started writing more often. And that came from one article that I wrote that kind of drove the way. And that's what I think is like, start at the minimal thing. Imagine yourself with the most money and time and what you want to do. And then imagine yourself with not having anything, and start with the smallest step, and you see where it takes you.
Yeah, that's such a great, simple way to put it. And so I wonder, when you connect with writing, you sort of zeroed in on this idea of writing.
Mm.
Where did that love come from?
I used to read a lot. I think because today we have social media and we have all of that. But when I was growing up, we had 1 hour of TV. That's it, and the rest You play with the broken toys, or I had Lego at the time. My uncle, every time he visited from abroad, he would bring the Legos, which my sister threw from the window and used to squander for me. I would never forgive her. But I used to play and I used to contemplate a lot and I used to read. Like the entertainment was reading. So I read poetry, I read stories, and I was fascinated. And I wanted to, at the time, uh, to be cool is to be a poet. Like these are the cool people that we looked up to, is that those people are poets. I think like right now the closest I would say is like rappers, that they are the modern day poets, if you wish. So poets were the people that were the cool people, and everybody read for them, and everybody shared, and songs would have their words. So I was like, can I write that? And I wanted to impress people at 16, I think, and I wanted to write for the girls I liked, and so poetry was my thing. And I just wanted to, the more I wrote, the more I like to write. And that's what I teach people as well, is like, if you want to discover love for something, do it and see if you like it. And the more I wrote, the more I wanted to write. And it's like, okay, I enjoyed this. Can I do it more often? And I used it as the way to reach out to people, how I kind of wooed or wooed my girl, or the girls that I have, the ones who didn't care and the ones who did. It's through poetry and through writing. So that's how I got around to liking it. And every time I write, it's kind of the act where I think for me, I have the most control. And it gives me so much kind of sense of power over words. And every time I write and somebody is like, your writing impacted me, there's that connection that I can't explain. And it's intoxicating. So that's why I write.
Yeah, it's interesting. I sort of I don't do much writing now, but I've been drawn to writing, and I think it was just when I love to read, and when I read that story, you connect with it on such an intimate level. I think it really comes down to, and I sort of hear this implied in what you're saying. It's a way to connect with somebody, right, and very powerfully and very deeply, and sort of give a bit of yourself to them, right? It sounds like
100%. I love
it's
that.
been a powerful, not just in like you wrote a book now that we're talking about, but just writing in general has been a powerful tool for connection for you.
Percent. And also I remember I read this book called On Writing by William Zinsner, and it's a great book. And he said writing is thinking on paper. So one of the great things about writing is to put your thoughts on paper. So you don't have to write, not everyone has to write, to write a book or write an article, or it has to be coherent. Like forget about all the editing and let's say the grammar and all of that. But just the act of writing is actually very powerful because you get to express your thoughts. Ideas, when you hear them in your head, they have a different, I would say, nature and texture. When you put them on paper, you materialize them. So, in the first thing that you can do, the first act that you can do is take your ideas and put them on paper. That's actually an action. That's a step forward. So, writing is such a powerful tool because it's expressive. It's your own expressions, journaling. Some people use it therapeutically. I think it's a very powerful tool that people still don't realize how powerful it is. And I'm wondering where people are actually, using ChatGPT right now to write their homework. And I would say, on the contrary, I mean, use it to help you by all means if that works for you. But the act of writing without judgment, I think, is one of the most powerful things that you can do as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to have, it's sort of a skill to sort of stand outside yourself and see your thoughts, right? And writing's
100%.
one very
Yeah.
powerful way to do that. And while I understand, I heard early on I was very leery about AI, and that's a whole other subject. But ChatGPT, and someone told me, someone made the analogy. Well, it's kind of like a calculator for language, and I was like, okay, I can sort of see that.
Interesting.
But I also see the other side of what you're sort of bringing up too is you're sort of taking from yourself or stealing from yourself the ability to really examine your most intimate thoughts.
Yeah. The way I use ChatGPT is I actually put down my thoughts. Usually I dictate them. The easiest thing, I'll go on a walk, I'll dictate my thoughts to my notes app, and then I'll take those dictation, which are like usually a ramble. And then I'll put it into ChatGPT and say, what are you finding there? Debate those ideas with me. Who talked about this before? And that is for me has been like very enlightening because they would be like, oh, there's this book or this writer's like, oh, interesting, something more to read, something more to discover. It's really fun to do that. Plus, when it it kind of, when it's your own writing, it's hard for you to kind of separate it or parse it or see what's valuable. It's kind of like your own kids, trying like, oh, these are mine. I don't want to protect them. But I put it to ChatGPT and say, be ruthless, and like whatever's ideas like organize them based on the best ideas, the worst ideas. And it's just an opinion, and I like that because it brings a lot of the experience that it's kind of encapsulated in the data that it ingested. So I find it very, very interesting to explore that.
Yeah, where I went from there is I kind of did the same thing. I used it, I wrote something and it felt like, okay, I don't, this isn't warmer. How would I make it warmer? And I've actually think I've learned more from it than I've had to do for me. So I think that's important because I didn't want to be robbed of that, I guess. I'm just realizing this, Hussein, right now as we're talking. So it's not like a
Yeah,
fully formed thought there.
that's a great thing about conversation. You get to discover while having the conversation. So
Yeah.
that's why I love to have those conversations.
So the word dark is front and center in your philosophy.
Mm.
And I guess when you say darkness, what does it symbolize for you in the context of mastery?
In darkness, the reason I called it a dark art is because it's this thing that is unknowable, that there is no process for it. It's really, you have to be willing to go and explore and test and experiment. And I think that is something because the way that the world works right now, and because business is kind of like the highest thing, to the point that we demand that the leader of a world of a country needs to be a business person. Business leads things because it's something to a certain extent we control. There are frameworks for business, there are strategies, there are all these studies and all of these things. But having worked in startup world and having worked with a lot of business leaders and having worked with a lot of entrepreneurs who went on to build hundreds of companies that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, I think the first thing that I realized is, number one, there's no guarantee. You can do everything right and there's no guarantee. And what ended up happening, especially in the last, I would say 15, 20 years, is that we compress time. Before, you can plan for a business in 5 to 10 years, and you can set a budget and things. You just go on and execute. So you spend time with planning, and then you spend time executing the plan. And most likely the world will not change by the time you finish the plan. Some things will change, but most likely it won't. Right now, in the last 100 days, the world is completely different, let's say, from before. The world's completely different before COVID, for example. Just one thing changed the whole world. We've never had that, or had that connection to it, and had the ability to change. I mean, of course, there were pandemics, but the world didn't change as fast. In a few months, everybody went online and we were remote, and everybody has to adjust to that. So I think what's happening right now is that things are changing really, really fast, to the point that we have to come to terms with the uncertainty of life. Life is always uncertain, no control. So what do we do then? So how do we go into the dark and, master our lives? And the idea is to test, to bring, that's why I called the art into it, is that it's not a process. There's no 1, 2, 3 in it. We always look for that. I think we put up a book and say, how do I manage my time? It's like, 1, do this, 2, do this, and then I apply it and things should work. But the reality is nothing works like that. You can learn, of course, from others, apply it, but you have to apply it in a way that you is willing to change. By all means, if you fly in a plane, of course, there are certain practices.
Yeah.
If you're being a doctor, engineer, yeah, these things have a lot of established discipline and follows laws and rules that are almost unbreakable, gravity, etc. But in life, you don't have that. You don't know what's going to happen. So how do you manage? So I want to introduce people to the idea that it's okay to test. It's okay to fall. It's okay to not having it figured out all the time. In fact, that is the way. If you are at home with it and accept it and acknowledge that that's the state of life, you're actually more likely to succeed, and you're more likely to think clearly rather than pretending that life is this thing that is not.
Yeah, I love that because it seems like it's almost like when it says dark, it's like it's going to be some kind of magical, fantastical thing. But really, it's like, listen, we kind of live in uncertainty. It's funny because in my mid 30s, I went and I got my MBA, and I remember my one financial professor. Present old, we had to present a business that and how it was going to perform in the stock market or whatever. And I remember everybody in the class, and this was sort of the thing, everybody just kind of took the historical data and said they did this and it failed. He's like, okay, that wasn't the assignment. He was saying, what would you do and how would it have performed different? I want you. And I realized, I'm like, well, what is the point of this? And really, it was like nobody actually knows what's going to happen, right? Nobody knows.
So true.
Everything's uncertain. And that is probably what I took away from my MBA is that we have people who you get really good at having the most supporting evidence for it. You stand confidently and say your side, and then you let it fly. But the part where people I think get held up is you got to experiment. You got to, you
100%.
say, why aren't you doing more? People usually say, I'm scared to fail, but you got to fail.
I
Got to
love
fail.
what you have. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I remember when I first reached out to you, I mean, you talk about, I think you had something like authenticity and something around joyful performance that stuck with me. And maybe you talk about it, but what it landed for me, the way, because this is, the word joy defines everything. It's not happiness, it's joy. And I don't know how you interpret it, and I would love to hear from you, but for me, joy is the is never the absence of pain. Like pain is part of it. Sometimes you go into exercise. I don't exercise as much, but part of it, there's a pain of exercise, especially if you haven't moved for a while, or let's say the pain of writing before it becomes a piece, because at the start it's like these disconnected thoughts and you're going through the pain of like, why am I not, it would be fun if I spit out an article and it's perfect. It's most of the time, some articles sometimes take with me sometimes 3 4 days to kind of figure out like, what am I writing about? And it's a painful process, but the joy of kind of going through the process and learning through it, and what I learn and who I become, that is for me. And how I enhance, that's why I got like, I love the word performance and I love joyful performance. I was like, this is how it is for me. And if we seek that joy in this little things that we do, like how I make this yerba mate, for example, like if we seek joy in everything rather than I want to live a happy life, and that I'm not against that, but I'm saying like how we perceive it, like we are all after happiness, as opposed to finding these moments of joy in anything and everything around us. And I think that there is a loss there, that we there is this blanket or general approach that to be happy, there are these things that you should have. You should have this much money. You should have a house on the beach. And I'm not against that. Or you should have these things, and these things that you see on Instagram that everybody's having, and you should travel the world and all of that. And honestly, I used to think like that. I remember seeing a friend of mine on Facebook, and every day he's in the city. I was like, oh my God, I wish I have his life. And I went and worked with him, and he worked in education. And I went, and I think for several years I traveled. And it was the most horrendous experience. I hated travel. I love being in a place,
Yeah.
but the traveling is so bad. It's like, it's like, why would I put myself through this pain? I'm happy being at home. I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere. So it's when we look for things that matter to us rather than our perception of happiness, is those moments of joy, I think, and we start being collectors of those. There's a different feel to it. What do you think is joyful happiness? I would love for you to tell me how you kind of interpret it.
Well, it's funny that you picked up on that. That was my attempt. And what I found is this: the world sort of communicates to us in outcome based, like do this and get this outcome. But really, what I've found in my experience is that if you are more process based, like enjoy the process there, that is the real shift that should happen. Right. And I think that is joyful performance. Like, for instance, I learned this lesson in running. I run distances. And let me just tell you, if you run a marathon, there's like 10 times during that where you're like, okay, this is it. This is all I can take. I'm not going to do it anymore. Okay. But you're just like, okay, I'm not going to stop though. I keep going. And then there's more. And I'm like, that was interesting to me. And so then I found that in other periods of life and
Mm.
places, and I just see something there. Like you said, it would be great if it spit out an article and like it was perfect. Right. But the sort of pain of like, no, that's not right. And that's not what I want to say. And there's something about that process that I think it just sort of, it's self-discovery, it's self-expression, it's connection. It's just all kinds of human things happen in there. And I think even though, so we even reflect back to the world, the outcome. I have a book out or whatever, but the process of getting to that, that's what we're talking about now, why you use the word dark. And I think that is sort of the behind the scenes processes that build up to this sort of, I don't know, this thing we call life.
I love it. And you touched on something that I think is very important, is that it looks differently for everyone. And I think that's what scares most of us, in the sense that, well, I want to have somebody else's life. They seem to be okay. And we make people up to not who they are. I mean, I mean, you mentioned Will Smith. I'm sure, as someone who had the ups and downs that he had, especially recently, like from the outside, when you first saw, let's say, a successful actor, has a ton of money, looks great, have a great body, like everything going on for him, and then you see, let's say, some of the things that happen in everybody's life. We all fuck up and we all, make mistakes, and and then say, well, I want that, but I don't want this. But the thing is, this is all made up, like there is no that without this. There is you can't get to the other side without actually, being. I always talk to people about, you're not a king, and you speak things to existence. You're a captain. You're navigating the ship of life, and the sea can throw everything at you, or give you a safe ride, or you can drown along the way. Who knows? All you know is that you're on a journey, and all you have is this current moment, that you make the choice in it. And that's what I want to give people to. It's like, we all come from all kind of pasts, and but at this moment we're equal in our ability to make choices, and we like to convince ourselves that because of my past, the only choices I have is this. When it's not true. I'm living reality of it, and it's not. And I've experienced like a lot of things, and not only what I've experienced, I've seen. My biggest thing, and actually what opened up to give me the ability to write this book, is because all of my life I thought that's my life. But when I actually ended up working with a lot of entrepreneurs and helping them build companies through a framework that guarantees, or let's say pushes them towards more success, or at least to fail fast and discover what the next idea is, I've seen people from all kind of backgrounds, especially here in Canada, immigrants, non-immigrants, from rich, poor, all kind of backgrounds, all kind of studies. I've worked with over 6,000 of them, and that was my lab. That was what I've learned through. And I was like, oh my God, we're so much the same, and our differences don't change that. It's what makes a difference for every one of those founders is the decision they make right now. It's not what you're stuck with. It's not how big your vision is. It's what you choose to do right now. Some of them didn't have big visions, didn't even imagine. I mean, even Mark Zuckerberg, regardless of what you think of him, he said when he first started Facebook, he never imagined Facebook will become a thing. It was just like, it was a kid out of schools, like wanted to do something. He may have wanted something, but he never imagined. And you see that continuously happen with a lot of these founders. And we talk about that. But even in life, no, I never imagined I'll be here, never imagined I'll be writing, never even imagined I'll even start a company. All I wanted at the time is just like what everybody else wanted, which is to have a car and a house.
Yeah. It's funny because that's sort of the outcome thought, it's like, oh, we have to get this to make X amount of money. And then there's like this sort of false idea that you're just going to coast from there. But like I said, you said the first thing I thought of when you said, I'm the opposite of this. My story's been completely different. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, my business has failed. I'm gonna, give up or whatever. But instead, you reinvented yourself in several different ways, right? And it was because of that focus on the process and not necessarily the outcome, and just kind of
Mhm.
trusting to the process that kind of got you there. I think that's really,
Absolutely.
really interesting. So you speak in the book a lot about shedding false identities. So I just wonder, what do you, when you're talking about false identities, and I know you discussed this a bit in the book, where do those false identities come from?
I think from what we grow up, and part of, let's say, our early upbringing, and especially right now, when if we scale back, I think, or even when I grew up in Syria, one of the key things is that when you have a large family and you live among that family, you don't grow up being raised by your parents per se. You grow up being raised by the community. So that gives you a lot of freedom to choose who you want to be. However, what the way that society is built right now, it's about the nuclear family. It's about, the parents and the kids. And you're influenced by your parents. And depending on how good your parents are, how bad your parents are, what their upbringing is, that's the direct influence. And maybe school, and maybe the community, but not as much. At the end of the day, you're spending the most time, and the biggest influence and the people with the most control are your parents. That's not the case where when I grew up. It's like we had one thing I write in the book is that we had visitors all the time, and these people, actually the way the Arabic kind of family goes, everybody interferes in your upbringing. Like they can tell if you do something wrong. Somebody actually from the neighborhood can actually slap you into into like doing something right or discipline you, and your parents will be on their side, not on your side. So it's in a certain extent you had this accountability to the community, and that shaped a little bit who you are. For me, I was shaped by the many gatherings into like these tents that we go, and you have all these men that are from the community. Or I would go with my mom, and all of the neighbors will be sitting and talking about things, and that's the stuff that shaped me and what they care about. So I had a little bit more options. And I think one of the things that that gave me is that I get to choose who I become. And my journey was when I was 16, I was looking for the truth. Because we come from a small religious sect called Ismailis in the Islamic religion, I wanted to prove that this is the right thing. So I went and researched and read. And then I went and researched and read about Islam. And then I read about Christianity. And then I read about Judaism. And then I read even more. And then I by the time I was 25, I lost interest in finding the one true path. And I was like, this is wonderful. I get to choose and I get to collect all of the good ideas from everywhere. And I get to choose who I am. And I think that is something that we don't think we have right now. We think we're governed by whatever conditions, whatever where I grew up, where my, the kind of financial conditions, the kind of upbringing. But at a certain moment, you can choose. And this is even proven by science. You can, in a split second, some people who left addiction, whether or anything in a split second they make a choice, or like running, or choose to be healthy. You can make a choice and you can completely remake your life. And that is what I advocate for. It's not to be a certain person, but that you realize that you have the choice to be a certain person. And I think we like to escape that because it has so much accountability in it. It's so hard for people to say I'm accountable for everything in my life, but gives them, it's in that fear. If you step into that fear and accept accountability, it's your biggest power. Because once you're accountable for everything in your life, just like you said, you're running this marathon and there are these ideas of leaving, but then you choose to continue. In that, there's immense power over everything, you know, over your body, over your environment, and even if you fail, but that power is what I want for people to have.
Yeah, it's funny because I have trouble explaining that to people, that power, because you just, when you say something like, oh, the power of your mind to even, have control of your body when it's sort of spent, to actually experience that. And the most real way I've experienced it is sort of in that marathon. It's really hard to get that across. When you think about, this idea of false identities, and if you were to kind of guide somebody through this process of peeling back the layers of who they think they are and discovering who they truly are, how would you guide them on that process?
That's a great question. I don't. I actually say it doesn't matter what, like a lot of people look for that. And another example of that is, what is my true passion? Finding my true passion. And I say to people, you know what? Yeah, you can definitely do that. And some people go, what is it? They meditate in India to, that's the cliche, right? They go to India to eat, pray, and love. They go to find themselves somewhere else. And I say, you know what? You have a better vehicle, and it's actually quite instantaneous. You can choose who you are. So instead of trying to find who you are, choose who you are. Try something for size and see what that happens. And you know what? If it doesn't work, choose again. And what happens in the constant choices, I say this, that it's an outer world journey to find an inner truth about yourself. So with the act of choosing and going through the journey, instead of standing still as like who I am and what do I really like, and kind of while life continues to pass by as like, and you're lost trying to find, what you can do is you can make choices, move with life, and along the way you'll stumble on something. Like me, how could I find, or how could I discover that I'm a writer if I didn't write? I chose to write, and I enjoyed it, so I wrote some more, and then I wrote some more, and I enjoyed it. It's the same thing that when you choose to be around somebody, like how can I find out who's my, the soul, twin, or what it would, I can't remember what the term is, or the person that I can enjoy the conversation with. How can I find that out unless I actually make the choice to have a conversation with someone?
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So one of the hardest parts of transformation is not always stepping into the new, it's sort of letting go of the old. So, what have you had to grieve, surrender, or burn down in order to rise in alignment with your calling?
I had to give in to the idea that I don't control anything. Now, I'm a very controlling person. I like to control my environment. I'm a
Mhm.
neat freak. My mom was what I used to come back from school at 14, 15. My mom would make me like clean up the whole house, and everything was in place. She's very meticulous, and I grew up to be very meticulous. So I love control, and I love control over my, like, for example, when I wanted to create a podcast, I remember I had to buy the perfect camera, the perfect mic. Everything had to be perfect in order for me to do something. And I think that the biggest lesson, and for me to come to terms with, is I don't control anything. I can do everything right, and the world will say, too bad, we don't care. So when I let go of all of that, I started to enjoy life more, and I let go of wanting to control things and more towards exploring and discovering, and it's kind of like, I think, the one of the biggest things that kind of made me enjoy everything. I used to want like my kids to be something. I wanted my love life to be perfect. I wanted the home to be like these desires to be controlled because I'm attached to my idea of something rather than the thing itself. And once I let go of that and I just sat with the thing, I enjoyed it even so much more. And I discovered that, oh my God, it's like, and that discovery was so enjoyable and opened up so many things I never expected even.
Yeah, it's funny how that the expectations, right, actually get in the way of you being present to
Yes.
the experience. You're very interested in how people perceive time,
Mm.
right? I think we're sort of almost talking about the same thing there.
Yeah. I'm fascinated with the idea because the time doesn't exist. We invented it. And for example, all that we have is now, right now. Whatever happened in the past, let's say if I get amnesia right now, everything that happened in the past doesn't exist anymore. So did it really happen? Like, so I think that's the that's the other thing, is like it kind of messes with your head when you try to explore these concepts. But the idea is it's less about stand in it. It's more about the experience of it. If you don't carry your past with you and you let it be where it is, and if you're not obsessed with the future to the point that all you're living is for the future, you can enjoy the current moment. And it doesn't have to be where you do it with everything. That's the other thing that I think we are as human beings, where I hate the maximalism part of it. It's like, if I want to do this, it has to be to the max. I was like, no, you can enjoy it this much. I don't have uh, that 0-1 mentality. I think also kills the joy of the little things. So in work, yeah, you need to have objectives and you need to go after results. And let's say if you're preparing for like a marathon, you have a deadline that you need to work towards, and you have a schedule that you have to follow. It's understandable, but that doesn't mean you have to do it in everything in life. There are some things where there's no planning. Like, not everything needs to be planned meticulously, and you need to have an outcome. Sometimes you can just be in the moment, and that gives you, I think, gives you access to the things that you said. I love it where you said it's about the experience, to the things that you never knew that you wanted, but when they happen or when you experience them, it's everything. Like, they mean the world. It's like, oh my God, I never knew that life has this aspect of it, or this experience. And that balance between, if you allow to your life the space for those, and for those kind of things, I think you start to experience for yourself, because we're talking about it right now, but it may mean something completely different for somebody else that's listening to us.
Yeah. There's a paradox which I've started to be able to identify with clients and even people I know in life, and that is we sort of set goals, right? And we think that by achieving this goal, this milestone, we're going to become something different on the other side of that. And the paradox is that in order to get past that milestone, in many cases, you have to become the thing that gets on the other side of that, right? Have
So
you
true.
found any truth in or seen anything like this?
100%. I think I love how you said it. Is like, which is what ended up being the most important thing about the goal. Because I have this thing about Everest. I use it a lot as a metaphor. I say almost like everything you want to do in life is like climbing a Mount Everest. There's the thing about climbing Mount Everest is that there's a certain height beyond which it doesn't matter how trained you are, how skilled you are, all of that doesn't matter. Everyone is equal at that time, at that level, because of the lack of oxygen. So the body, it kind of degrades. Even you most fit, of course you need to have somewhat fit. You don't need to be like 400 pounds, but or very skinny. But most people are equal at that level. And when you reach Everest, you can't stay there. It's actually, you have to go down or else you die. So even that moment at the top of Everest, you can't just stay there. You have to go down in order to go up again to another mountain and enjoy it. And all of these pictures that show you one person at the summit, it's actually not true. You need a team to get there. So it's like, it's dispelling all of these myths that we have about the great man theory, where like the one person that makes it all happen, or success and like living in success. And there's no such thing. There are moments of success, whereas all of the work is happening across. You spent like months in order to reach that summit where you enjoy it for a moment and then you have to go down again, and the peril of going after it. And I like using that, because the idea that you need to, it's the success itself and being at the summit is meaningless. It's the kind of person that you become along the way and who you need to deal with. And most of the time, I read like extensively about that. The reason why some people succeed or not, of course, there are some mistakes and everything, but it's about will, and it's about who you become. It's about actually conquering yourself, not the mountain. The mountain doesn't give a shit about you. It's always going to stay there, and
Yeah.
you never conquered it even to stay in the first place. But what you're conquering is yourself, and you're conquering all the perceptions of what's possible and what's not, all your expectations, the idea of that, I can make it on my own, or I'm the strong person. You realize that you never know until you get there and who you need, because sometimes there are certain conditions that hit you. I can't remember the name of it, but it hits you, and you never know who actually is impacted by that. So you can't guarantee that it's not going to be you. So you really need to rely on others. And these are the kind of things that you come to discover about yourself through the life journey, like you said, that makes you the kind of person who you are. It's not the goal or achievement of the goal or not. You didn't achieve the goal? Guess what? You can go after it. You didn't win this marathon? You can go after the second marathon. You didn't succeed in this business? There's always another business. And then I say, and then you die.
Yeah, right.
And then you die. Regardless of whatever you achieve, regardless of how much money you achieve, then we all end up in the grave.
I think that's a great analogy that you just shared about, um, what it means to sort of be transformed by the journey towards your milestone. But there's something else in there too, and I think this is something that I think a lot of us out here, especially post COVID, are discovering, and that is that there's absolutely something vital for us to be had in community. And I think I just read there's a sort of celebrity psychiatrist out there named Phil Stutz. And Phil Stutz has this new book out there, and this quote just jumped in. He said, "Nothing meaningful happens outside of a community."
Mhm.
And I just was like, wow. And I was really trying to think of, of course, there's that idea of conquering yourself, right? But even in conquering yourself, it sort of requires support. And so this idea of community really seems vital to your sort of idea of self mastery as well.
Yeah. It's so true that I think that is something that I didn't I didn't touch on it as much, but it's hopefully present as because I focused more on the person, because you're the biggest obstacle against that. Because once you actually are making choices in the moment, and once you're kind of attuned to your own lack of ability to achieve, like when I say you're a captain on your own ship, but you certainly realize, and maybe that should be the theme of the next book, which is you need people, because you're not going to be able to do a lot of stuff in life without the others. Like if you want to enjoy love, you need somebody to enjoy love with. If you have all the money in the world, if you don't know, like somebody has to create the stuff that you're going to buy with that money. It's meaningless without others. And we kind of kind of drifted away from that, or it's in the background, and we spend our life focused on us and how can we succeed and how can we achieve. The easiest thing, what is it? Somebody, I think the saying that I love is the easiest thing to get what you want is to help as many people as possible to get what they want. And by living that, what ends up happening is you end up stumbling on the most amazing people, you end up learning, you end up having the greatest conversations. And that is where your actual growth happens. Growth happens is through the interactions with others. Growth never happens on your own.
Yeah, it's so true, and I think that there's something there that I can't fully form a sentence around, but there's something magical that happens. You're right, it is, at a high level, it's like, if you want to love somebody, you need to, there's somebody needs to be there, right? And you need, if you want, even if you have all the money in the world, somebody has to be able to make that money worth
Yeah.
something. So, but I think community is definitely something that I definitely hear a call for people wanting to join a community. Especially maybe it's like a Western thing. There's like, for example, not as many people go to church every
Mm.
Sunday or Saturday or whatnot. And that's, among other things, there's sort of a breakdown in community that happens there. So just an interesting idea I sort of heard mentioned in that. And it takes a team to get you to the top of Everest.
Yeah. I think I'm toying around with this idea of what makes us who we are. And one of the things, like if we look at, let's say, how we behave, and we look at most of what we achieved right now is done through thinking and through the power of thought and the power of imagination and stuff. It's the mind that got us to where we are as a species. And the idea, the mind is self-absorbed and fearful. It's like it's all about protecting us. It's all about establishing a protection. And at a certain point, what ends up happening is when we were smaller groups, safety was in that group. You establish that safety with the group that you have because you know that you can't do everything. But then when we move to the way we live today, you can get things done by paying people to do it. So you didn't need community, because at that time you needed community because somebody needed to hunt while you take care of the kids, or the other way around. Somebody need to clean up. You needed those people to come together in order to be able to achieve that. But then we built a society where we're many, and we have hierarchy, and you can get things done by paying people to do it. It's no longer a community thing. Lost that touch with the thing that makes us successful and keeps that safety. And now safety is distance from people. It's safer to not ask someone, like reaching out, let's say to you, to do this podcast, because rejection, we're fearful of rejection. We deal with it the same way we would deal as our life is threatened. We see it all the time. We see it even in our movies. Like, oh, I'm not going to ask that girl. Oh, that's the kind of the usual example. Because what if she says no? And like we spend a series about these people. Like, just go freaking and ask her. And
Yeah.
like, it's a series, several episodes of these people living in their own feelings and never saying anything. What's the worst that's going to happen? She's going to say no. So, like, you're not going to die. So that's the other thing. I think we're so fearful of living in the moment and enacting in the moment that we live in our heads. And I think when we start living in the moment, what's going to happen is we'll find community because we start saying good morning to our neighbors. We start, asking someone to say, hey, let's go have a coffee. And the worst I can say is like, no, I'm busy, or I don't want to have a coffee with you. So okay, you ask the other person. And that's, I think, how I found community in Vancouver. Come to think of it, now that you're raising that topic, is that when I came to Vancouver, I didn't have a community. I left a community in Dubai that I spent years building, 11 years. And I came here and I had zero community. And nobody gave a shit about who I am or my accomplishment, because they don't know me. And then what I did is I went out and I met people. And, when I reached out to people, some people's like, don't connect with me on LinkedIn, or I'm not interested or something. I had some rejections. Most people said yes. And ended up those people that I met at the start, which a lot of them are still my friends till a decade, they were, if I didn't go out and say, let's have a coffee, I would have never built a community. So instead of looking for a community, I end up creating it by dealing with what I needed at the moment and just taking action on it.
Saying you said so much there, but one thing really jumped out at me, and I think there's a key sort of change that has happened. You said, whatever, thousands of years ago, safety meant being sort of in a group, and now safety means sort of saying, no, I'll do it alone, right? And
Yeah.
I think like you said, it completely strikes me now that it's funny because you started. I knew where you were going with the story. You're like, oh, but you went out with coffee with like 100 people, right? And that's going to build a community, right? And I guess I wonder what caused you to kind of make that choice. It seems to be sort of against the grain to say yes to connection as opposed to yes to the safety of not being connected, whatever that means.
Yeah. I think the secret is that I didn't feel stuck, or I removed the idea that once I make a decision, I'm stuck with it. What does that mean? Like when I come, let's say to Ryan and say, "Hey Ryan, let's go out for a coffee," and you say no, we carry that no with us, and we say, "What does it mean? Why doesn't he like me?" I was like, It's the first time I meet you. I mean, for all intents and purposes, let's say in that hypothetical scenario, we may not matter to ourselves, and everybody go and build their own life. Or there might be the opportunity for us to kind of become friends and have great conversations. So we lose that opportunity because we don't want to deal with the pain of failure or the pain of hearing no. And that pain comes from our childhood, because who said no for us the first is the people we loved the most. And it meant at that time it's existential, because if your mom says no or your dad says no, if they don't feed you, you're completely helpless and dependent on them. But right now, you're not helpless. You have the whole world, and you have 8 billion people to find a community amongst. I mean, why not ask? And if they say no, move on to the next person. I think one of the best things I learned is in through a sales actually workshop, where we were learning sales, and somebody said to me, like, how much at the time, how much is your worth of one contract? I said $20,000. And he says, hypothetically, or like from practice, how many people do you need to talk to close one? I said, well, around 20. He said, okay. He said, then everyone you meet, when they tell you no, it's like giving you $1,000. I said, come again? He said, well, you need to go through 20 to get to close $20,000, right? He said, yeah. So he said, when you meet someone and they say no to you, you move on to the next. You're one step closer to that 20,000. It's like, oh, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. So it's like the no is the path to yes. And another way of saying it, if you like sports, or like, Michael Jordan, one of the best, the greatest players, or the
Yeah.
greatest athletes in the world, he had to risk throwing a ball or shooting the ball at the basket and missing in order to hit. And I think his average is like 70% misses and 30% hits, or something around that. But the hits are not more than the misses. It's more misses than hits. But he has to be willing to do that. That doesn't mean that you have to seek failure. Of course, you're seeking success, but you have to be willing at least to accept the possibility of failure in order to reach the success. You ran the marathon. You have to risk the possibility that you're not going to win the marathon in order to, or else you're not going to do anything. And I think that's what we're so focused. Everything is teaching us in school. We study for a year to be able to pass. And if we don't pass, what does that mean about us? We'll lose all the opportunities. And we connected that to failure. And I don't mean like failure is okay and seek it, but just understand that it's part of the process. You have to fall your way to success. You have to experience pain to find joy. And that is who we are as human beings. I'm not saying it's fun. I would love to live in a state of euphoria all the time, but it's just not the reality.
I think there's a lot for the listener to distill out of what you said there. So I'm just going to leave that as it is. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
You've sort of distinguished in the book sovereignty versus control. And these are like two words that many people sort of confuse, right? So could you sort of help us unpack the difference of how you, I don't know, how you reclaim sovereignty and how that shapes the way you relate to your life and your choices?
Yeah. So in today's world, like right now, I'm releasing this book, and the perfect scenario is I released a book. It's a bestseller. I'm on top of the world. I'm interviewed everywhere. A New York Times bestseller. I sell millions of dollars, and I never have to work a day in my life again. That is, let's say, it's a scenario that and it's okay. It's great to have it. I'm not saying I don't want it, but when I'm attached to it so much that anything that veers off of that threatens my control over my world, then I'm in a fearful scenario, and everything that happens along the way, like something doesn't work out. It's like, oh my God, I make it a big deal. and I'm angry and I'm stressed all the time. And I've had these. I've had these in business. I've been like that. I've been like that. Even I always think I'm a work in progress. And then that doesn't mean I don't want it. I can still want this, but I can still also be in at home or okay with things not going that way. And and sometimes understanding, I think one of the key things also to understanding is to understand that a lot of times the things that happen in life are a result of luck. And one of the writers I like the most is Jim Collins. He wrote the book called Great by Choice. I love that because it has choice, which is my word, and he talks about greatness. And he wrote the book Good to Great as well, a great book. And he talks about luck. And he says that he compares some of the most successful companies, and in the same field, some of the companies that weren't as successful, some of the companies that achieved 10 times the market average. And he finds that all of these companies had the same amount of lucky breaks. In fact, some of the time, the companies that failed had more lucky breaks. Were you ready to capitalize on luck when it came? Another way of saying it is, I think Richard Branson said, opportunities are like buses. There's always one coming. So the question is, what do you want, and are you ready to take kind of advantage of it? And when you're so committed to a result that you can't see all of the other options that are in front of you, you kind of miss out on the beauty of life. Something like when you said enjoying the experience. So have that goal and have it what you want, but don't be too committed to it that you miss the opportunities to achieve even a greater goal, or a goal nonetheless that is also enjoyable. I think that's the difference for me between the control, wanting the desire, and I actually embrace it. I want to control my world. I'm not ashamed of it, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I love to control my world, and I want it exactly the way I want it. I am able to enjoy it however it unfolds. And I think that's kind of the fluctuation, or the movement between being in serenity with life and being in control of life. And it's okay to move between both.
Given the context of our conversation and the context of the book, The Dark Art of Life Mastery, your book here, if someone listening today felt something stir inside them, just like sort of a quiet knowing, a connection, a resonance, what's one question you'd want them just to sit with this week?
I think the greatest question is, if you had all the time and money in the world, what would you choose for yourself? I mean, really, what would be the choice you would want, and it would mean the world to you? And if they sit with that question and just open themselves up for whatever answers come in, and just be curious, like, don't take the answer and run with it. It's like, oh, this is it. Just be curious. It's like, why is that? And just dig deeper and let it tell you something about yourself. I think that is something that can open up a lot of things for them.
Especially if you got to sit with it a week, you can't come up with an answer until
Yeah.
then.
I think a question that I'm not asked as much, maybe because I'm 51 right now, and like life starts going this way instead of this way. What is like, and because I achieved so much, people are more interested in my background rather than like where's next that I'm going. Like, what is the biggest
Yeah.
thing? And I think that might be a question. And I think the answer for that is like, what is my next big thing? I want to take on the biggest goal that I've ever taken, which is completely transforming the world. Some of the biggest people, or some of the people that I've respected or followed the most, or kind of dream of not living their life, but being as impactful as they are, like Gandhi or Mandela. And not because they're great and because everybody likes them. It's because their impact on the world. And my biggest wish for me is to have an impact on the world that really helps people as many people as possible transform their lives. And that's why I want my book to be a bestseller and to go everywhere. And that's why I wrote it in the first place. So that is my wish for myself. And that is what I'm after, I wrote this book because I couldn't mentor everyone myself. Everybody that comes to me, I say yes, even for half an hour to help them. And I said, but that's not enough. There are millions of people out there that maybe I'm able to help. Maybe hubris from me to think that I can help them with their life, but also it comes from a place that I really, really, really think that we can live a better life. And this is my way of contributing at it, or to it. And I think if many of us, like you, like others, through a podcast, through writing, through our daily life, contribute to moving us as a species forward to a better way of existence, I think we'll be in a better place.
So my response to hearing you say that, and I think the words that you said are, "I want to transform the world. I want to take on this huge goal." And I immediately got like goosebumps when I said that. And I was like, well, I've heard people say that before, but what, and I think, like you said, I don't think it's hubris. There was no, there was humility and there was confidence in that. And there was surrender in it as well, which sort of made it just authentic, sort of easy to connect to. And I think and with those two things, it made it seem like, of course you are. Of course you're gonna do that. So,
Thank you. I appreciate
but
that.
it was really interesting. I love your mission here. I love this. I love the book, the whole dark art idea, self-mastery, just this is I love this space to explore. And this has been just a great conversation with me, Hussein. So thanks so much for your time today. Where can people connect with you online, purchase the book, etc.?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. It was a joyful conversation, and I've really enjoyed every minute of it. You're a great conversation, and you have a great voice, by the way. I love it. You have
Thank you.
an incredible voice. So I enjoyed listening to you. It's like, okay, I want him to say stuff. So
Thank you.
when I have a podcast, I will invite you to it. But yeah, you can find me at husseinhallak.com. You can register for the book. The book is available, so you can buy it from there. You can follow my write. Just search my name. I have a Substack right now, so hopefully you like it. And yeah, thanks very much for having me, Ryan. It's been such a joy to have a conversation with you.
Best of luck to you.
Thanks.